Okay, so today we are excited to introduce our third call for submissions. So this will be our third cohort, and we're focusing on gynecologic oncology this time. So Sam and I here will go through the logic behind this and how and the research that we did. And so first, we'll just start by introducing ourselves. We're both on the Science and Dealflow team. My name is Jenna. My background is in molecular biology. And before AthenaDAO, I studied RNA biology and longevity. And my research in longevity is what got me really thinking deeply about women's health and women's longevity. And that brought me to AthenaDAO.
Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Cote, and like Jenna, I joined AthenaDAO shortly after completing my PhD. By training, I'm a neuroscientist, and my specialty is the influence of hormones on the cerebrovascular system. And so I use my expertise in hormones in the Science and Dealflow group.
And yeah, so who is AthenaDAO? So basically, we are the leading decentralized community-driven platform enabling translational women's health research, education, and funding. So our premise is the science is first. And so we know that if we focus on research and development, this will lead to more clinical data. With this clinical data will come more investments, and from this will lead to new therapeutics and new treatment options for women. And so the problem has been so far that despite women being half of the world's population, the largest consumer market in the world, we have basically been a blind spot in the biotech and pharmaceutical industries. And this is largely driven by a data gap and a funding gap. So the data gap has come from, is largely driven by policy. Basically, it wasn't until about 21 years ago that women were legally included into clinical trials. And even to this day, there's still some issue with getting enough women into earlier phases of clinical trials. So, for example, phase 1 trials, which assess the safety and the dosage of a drug, women are still not represented enough in these early phases of the clinical trials. And on the animal model side, it wasn't until 2016 that the NIH in the United States mandated that female animals also must be included in biomedical research. So together, this has led to this enormous data gap and essentially ineffective treatment for women. And also, this is exacerbated by the funding gap, where the NIH spends less than 10% of their budget on women's health conditions. So, together, this has led to an enormous market gap, of which AthenaDAO is addressing. And so, if we just look overall at the landscape of biomedical research, basically, this is a long process that begins from discovery and ultimately a new product or therapeutic. A lot of this early discovery and fundamental research is carried out in academic institutions and funded by public research or funded by public agencies. And a lot of this work doesn't necessarily translate into a product. And but of the things that do, these products are developed by companies, and the investment is driven now by private investment. And so, in general, biomedical research faces this valley of death product where a lot of these early discoveries do not make it into a product or into a company. And basically, and when we look just at women's health, there's a lot of opportunities because women's health research is still in this more discovery and fundamental research phase where we haven't even encountered the valley of death problem yet. So there's a lot that has been overlooked in the women's health space. And so at AthenaDAO, we use a DAO model to fund, govern, and incubate early stage translational research on women's health. And so basically, we are a decentralized collective of experts. And so we are truly global with members across the world. And it includes researchers, clinicians, and people from business and legal backgrounds. And we all come together to make decisions of what research projects to fund. And as far as the funding goes, we use novel funding mechanisms. So we use blockchain technology to fund these projects, and basically this allows the process to go in a much more collaborative and transparent manner.
So today, as we move through the rest of the presentation, we'll be discussing more detail the research that Jenna and I conducted and the focus that we've chosen within female oncology on the cancers that affect specifically women, as well as those that are reserved to the gynecological cancers. So when we think about cancers in females, we're all very aware of breast cancer, but some of the more lethal ones receive a little bit less attention, such as the uterine and ovarian cancer, as well as cervical cancer. So in the next few slides, you'll see why we've decided to focus on cervical, uterine, and ovarian cancer.
And so basically, Sam and I started by looking at the incidence rates of cancers that affect women, and also looking at how the research funding is spent. And basically what we found is that there's a mismatch between the incidence rates and the amount of funding depending on the cancer. And so if we just look, starting with the incidence rates, if you look at the top 10 cancers that affect women, in the top 10 is all 3 gynecologic cancers, with cervical being the highest, uterine cancer in the middle, and then followed by ovarian cancer. But what is really surprising is then when we look at the federal research dollars by the National Cancer Institute, which is the largest funder of research, of this $6.4 billion, less than 1% goes to uterine cancer, despite it being in the top 10 cancers affecting women. And if we look at this a little closer, like I said, less than 1% of these funds go to uterine cancer. Only about 2% go to cervical cancer, 3% for ovarian cancer. And yeah, together, so this is nowhere near the amount of funding that breast cancer is seeing. And if we look at nonprofit organizations that also fund research, there's actually only 2 one for cervical and another for uterine cancer that have over $5 million supporting them. So there's a funding gap for the gynecologic cancers.
This funding gap then leads to a representation issue. So if we look at the research that's published about cancers, we see that the more lethal cancers are published in less high impact journals. So that means their impact in journals that are less read, less cited, and less influential. So you can specifically see ovarian, uterine, and cervical cancer are published in much lower high impact journals compared to breast cancer. So this means that there is less work that is being taken. The work that has already been done is being consulted less and influencing less future studies. So now when we look at the lethality of the gynecological cancers, we see that both ovarian and uterine cancers account for 2% of all cancer deaths, and the survival rate for these cancers is also very low. So for example, ovarian cancer, only about 50% of individuals who receive a diagnosis will live past 5 years, and only 20% of individuals who receive a diagnosis of uterine cancer will live past 5%. And then those that do survive, this small percentage, They also experience a large decrease in their quality of life after their treatment, affecting all domains, including physical, mental, and sexual health. And this pattern of lethality, while overall cervical cancer tends to have a lower mortality rate, we do see that in low-income countries there is a much higher rate of death associated to these cancers that are preventable, as we know that access to vaccine and screening can significantly improve outcomes for cervical cancer, also providing an important opportunity for cervical cancer. So taking all of this information together, we've highlighted detection and screening that we think are important opportunities for the gynecological cancers. So for example, when it comes to cervical cancer, improving access to the vaccine as well as regular physical exams to detect the cancer early. When it comes to uterine and ovarian cancer, more work needs to be done to develop better detection methods so it can be detected early to improve outcomes for women. As we know that, for example, with ovarian cancer, there's no reliable blood test or screening test that can be done. And also uterine cancer awareness, especially regarding symptoms, could also help outcomes for women. So now, taking all of this in together, we are calling for submissions for research for ovarian, uterine, and cervical cancers from all of our community of researchers, startups. We look forward to seeing your applications and reading them. So you can find the link to the submission form on the QR code on the screen. We invite you to follow us on social media and join our Discord. We look forward to discussing women's health with all of you.